All right, good evening. It is 7 o'clock, so I will call to order the November 21, 2023 meeting for the City of Troy Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Mike Bossenbrook. I'm the chair of the board, and welcome to everyone who's here tonight for our hearing of cases. We have a relatively light agenda, so I'll just jump right in. Let's begin tonight with the roll call. So Mr. Evans, when you're prepared, can you call the roll?
Mr. Fox.
Here.
Mr. Forster.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Here.
Mr. Desmond.
Here.
Ms. Chambers.
Here.
Mr. Bossenbrook.
Here. Very good. Let's move on now to our second item, which is the reading of our statement of procedure. And I will turn to my right, Mr. Desmond, if you're willing and able, could you read us the statement of procedure for tonight?
The Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by the Troy City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Applicants must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the approved agenda. When an item is called, the chairperson will verify that the applicant is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. If there is less than a full board, 7 members, present at a meeting, an applicant may request a postponement so his or her request can be heard by a full board. If there is no request for a postponement, the applicant will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the applicant makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairperson will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand and, when recognized by the chairperson, come up to the podium. The speaker should identify themselves with name and address, indicate their relationship to the property in question, i.e. next door neighbor, live behind property, etc., and state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairperson. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairperson to speak at one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairperson will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal the board's decision to Oakland County Circuit Court.
All right, thank you, Mr. Desmond. Move along to our third item, which is approval of September's meeting minutes. So unless there's any discussion, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Fox moves. Can I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Desmond seconds. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Evans, vote on motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Bossenbrook.
Yes.
Mr. Forster.
Yes.
Ms. Chambers.
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Fox.
Yes.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Very good. The minutes are approved, and now we'll move on to the approval of tonight's agenda. Unless there's any discussion or comments, we'll go ahead and approve tonight's printed agenda. And that will take us to the 5th item, which is hearing of our case tonight, which is item 5A, variance request for 4370 Hedgewood. So, Mr. Evans, whenever you're ready, if you could walk us through, introduce this application to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a variance for subject property 4370 Hedgewood, a variance request to allow a proposed home addition to be constructed 26 feet 1 3/8 inches from the rear property line, where the development approval requires the addition to be set back 35 feet from the rear property line. Now, this is an aerial of the overview of the neighborhood. Long Lake is at the top. We've got I-75 on the left and Livernois at the bottom, and the subject property is down here in the middle. I'll continue to zoom in. That's the front street. The subject property is just about in the middle of this slide. I've overlaid the zoning map, and everything in the yellow you see, which is everything in the map, is zoned single-family and used for single-family residential. And here's a close-up aerial of the subject property. The applicants provided a survey of the property, and we've got Hedgewood here on the left. This is the house with the garage, and this blue area towards the back, this red rectangle, is where the proposed addition is. Applicants provided some photos of the rear of the house and the additions going to the right. And this is the site plan that you've all seen in your packets, just showing the call out of the proposed addition being less than the required setback. And then they've also provided some 3D models of what the house is going to look like. So in order to proceed, he requests relief from the board. I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Questions from the board for city staff?
So,
Mr. Fox?
so when I was reviewing the application, I saw, so this was a part of a cluster development?
Right.
Okay, is it normal for cluster developments to set a 35-foot setback on that? Is that like common practice or standard
Well,
practice?
this was done in 2006,
Okay.
and I'm not convinced the ordinance, we have a cluster ordinance now. I don't know if it's, how similar it was.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fox. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Well, at this point, we will invite the applicant forward. If, sir, you'd like to identify yourself, and feel free to step up to the microphone and give us your presentation.
Sure. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ananda Pandey. I'm the homeowner of this property. So before I'd like to start, I'd like to thank the officials of City of Troy and Mr. Evans. They were all so kind and very helpful to guide me through this entire process. So we are the original homeowners. We got the house in 2012, constructed that at that time and moved into the house. It was a time when it was really hard to find a house in Troy. Things were just going so fast. So as this subdivision, this 16 houses, it was a new development at that time, late 2000s, and the builder had set it up as an R1C cluster option. And as it's shown in the site plan, they had a typical setback requirements called out as 35 feet in the rear and 25 feet in the front. So the houses in the north of the subdivision, or the first few houses, are slightly bigger. It's got about 140 feet depth of lot area, and the street kind of angles in towards east, and we have a common area right in the front of the middle of the houses. Our house is right in the middle, as you can see in the visual there. Our lot depth is only 120 feet by 55, so compared to the city of Troy, it's a relatively narrow, shallow, small lot here. On top of that, the way the builder had constructed the house is he has maximized it in the sense he went from the front setback requirement line, like started the house at like the 25 feet and went all the way up to the 35 feet rear line. But the build area is only 1352 square feet of the house. So the house is not big, but it just narrows down. This does not allow us any room to add anything if we wanted to desire. So that's with the proposed addition, what we are planning to do, it's a two-story addition, so just extending 10 feet deep. Like where you saw the patio in the pictures, just up to where the patio was is where we are planning to extend. So it'll only add up to 100 feet in the floor area, which will still keep the build lot coverage to less than 30. It only takes it up to 25%, so it'll still be less than the 30% required by the city here. As you saw in the pictures, the house opens up to the woods, so there's nobody behind us. So I think the addition, what we are planning to do is also not going to obstruct any light or air flow to the adjacent properties, anything that we have. And thanks, Mr. Evans, for sharing the letter that you just gave it to me before the meeting. As you saw in the picture, we are not going to have any windows on the sides in the second story that we are constructing. We respected our neighbors' privacy as well as ours. Like we don't want things. It's a thing. So that's by plan. So you can already see that in the picture, like how we actually have it. There are not going to be any windows on the side when we do it. It's just going to have the window, just like how we have it now. It's just going to be like that when we extend the house there. It was discussed in the beginning, the newer subdivisions right next to us, They are, I don't know if it's called as a clustered option or what, but it's got a 25 feet rear setback requirement. There was one property that was discussed during the last meeting, Audley Court, right, which has a 25 feet setback requirement. So if our property had a 25 feet setback requirement, then we will still fit within the, norms here. So that's my request, and I kindly request you guys to review and approve our variance request.
All right, thank you, sir. I'll leave time now if there's any members of the board that would like to ask questions of the
Can I
petitioner.
make one more comment? I do have
Yes, sir.
printed copies from my HOA. So I added some letters from my neighbors in the application packet. I wasn't able to get the HOA thing at that time, but I have like printed copies if I wanted to just give it as an email from my HOA.
If you wanted to walk over to give it to Mr. Fox, he can pass it down. Do any members of the board wish to ask any questions of the applicant? Don't see any hands going up, although folks are looking at your submission here. I have one question, if I could ask. So I appreciate, first of all, your presentation and your written materials. They're very helpful and well laid out, so thank you for that. You touch on all the different elements of the statement of practical difficulties, which is helpful for us to think through. When you talk about what is exceptional about your property, you mentioned that it's shallowness, narrowness, and smallness. And I'm just curious, looking at, I don't know what page it is that Mr. Evans could bring up, but it looks to me, at least visually, that the properties kind of north and south of you are all similarly shaped and have a similar footprint. So can you just kind of go into more, what is it about your specific property that, relative to the properties in your sub and around you, that make it uniquely shallower?
I mean, the 4378, 4370, 4362, all have the very same lot size, 6098, compared to the other houses in the north. And as you go down to the south, it's all like widens up, as you can actually see there, right? So, and the way the elevation is set up is it kind of angles in. So as they go down to the south, the houses just keeps pushing back into the thing. So the rear line of the thing is pretty straight, but the front is actually angled. So if they actually start a little ahead, they may have a little bit more area in the rear. I mean, obviously I don't have the measurements, but you can actually see the houses don't start in a straight line in the front, but they have the rear line kind of straight in the back.
Do you know, just anecdotally, if those houses have a similar situation, meaning that the builder, kind of built out to the setback, and kind of a similar issue that your neighbors have?
There are a couple of different floor plans, and they have like slightly different elevations there. So, so depending on the floor plan, I don't know, like certain houses, for example, our house has a vaulted ceiling, so and a tandem garage. So we don't have any floor thing here, but the other ones has more like, no vaulted ceilings, or high ceilings. It's got like rooms on all the levels here and at the top level, right? So it may have like a little bit more coverage area for them. So depending on what they're planning to add, the needs might be a little bit different, but they may fall into the similar situation here. But everything is, as you can see, compared to the next subdivision, the Blakely and the Audley Court, the houses are much smaller and narrower here.
And you said you are the first owner of the property?
Yes. Yeah.
You bought it from the builder?
Yeah.
Okay. In 2012?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. McCauley?
So when this house was built, did you select the model that you wanted, or were you able to select the model you wanted, so it was already built when you bought it?
So it was pretty much done, like the foundation and everything was done. And as I said, at that time, it was like either you get the house now, pay the token advance and get the house now, or the house is going for someone else, right? So we didn't have much option. We liked the area. We wanted to be in city of Troy, so we got it. So we didn't select the floor plan that was going to go there. It was just,
Just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other members of the board? I don't see any. Okay, I think we're good, sir. Thank you for your
Thank you.
presentation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So at this time, I will open up public hearing, public comment, if there's any members of the public. I don't see anyone here. I know there is a written correspondence that we received on our desk. I don't know, Mr. Desmond, if you want to maybe just describe it, or?
Yeah, basically it is from Mr. Manju George at 4362 Hedgewood, and he is basically indicating that he is comfortable with the project proceeding, but requests that windows not face his property, basically keep the windows to the backyard, which the applicant has already covered when he made his presentation.
All right.
I don't
Thank you,
believe we
Mr.
have
Desmond.
anything else.
I think we have,
Two in the packet,
there's a couple items.
Oh, within the packet.
In this.
3 in the packet, 36, 37, 38 pages.
Of the PDF.
Yep.
Yeah, those came with the application.
All right, I do see that. Got one. No concerns. No concerns. It looks like it's a form letter that was handed out that was just signed by multiple parties. So we have 3 that are in agreement.
Okay.
4, sorry.
I guess just to point out that one of those 4 is the same resident who sent us this email, 4362.
Oh.
Yep,
all right.
they approved, they submitted a form letter
Yeah, I
indicating
see
they had no
that.
concerns and the email that was referenced earlier.
All right. And then we have the email from the board, HOA board member
Yes.
as well. Okay. That's what we have for written public comment. I don't see any members stepping forward to speak, so we will close the public hearing portion and now bring it back to the members of the board to discuss. Mr. McCauley?
Mr. Evans, could you go to our packet, page 25, please? Okay. My concern, in item E in his presentation, won't affect light and air. I'm going to disagree with that, because if I look at the setback of his house, it's probably a couple of feet farther east than his neighbor to the north. And if we put a 2-story addition on that, that means their whole patio area will not get any sunlight from noon on with the light from the south, from the sun from the south. Okay? If you look at the top picture, the house to the right is to the north. It's set to the west, just a couple feet compared to the other one. If you put a 2-story addition on that, their whole backyard, their whole patio area then will not get light after noon as the sun's to the south. So that's my concern, that does affect the view, the light to the neighbor to the north. And the neighbor to the north has not responded in any way, positive or negative to this. But that would be my concern. If I was the neighbor to the north and then my patio was in the shade from noon on every day, I would not be a happy camper. But I'm just pointing that out. The lot dimensions are similar to his neighbor's. Just pointing that out.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Any other member of the board? I see Mr. Fox, hand up.
I guess to the point when it comes to the sun, my understanding is that the sun would mainly come from the east to the west. I'm not sure if a property to the south would affect sunlight. At least that's not, my house also faces east to west, and we don't have any interference from our neighbors, even though a couple of us have, them have projections kind of back farther than my house. But again, I don't really know without seeing like a photometrics or something kind of showing, you know what I mean, throughout the day. So that is a point to be discussed for sure. And then I do think that there is credence to the small size. Normally, when a cluster development is discussed by the city nowadays, they adjust setback requirements to address this sort of issue. You know, I think this might just be a case where it was built too soon for us to have as comprehensive of an ordinance. And if that house were to have been built today, the setbacks wouldn't even have been an issue, I guess, in this particular instance. So I'm of the opinion that that constitutes an unusual shape or issue with the property, is that it is exceptionally small, given, you know, our typical ordinance when it comes to clusters.
Desmond?
For the city staff, do we have, what are the current setbacks for the current cluster zoning ordinance? You know that off the top of your head?
I don't know them off the top of my head. I might be able to look them up during the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll offer a couple of thoughts while Mr. Evans looks that up. So one thing that popped into my mind as I thought about this was, you know, I think we've dealt with a couple of variance requests that were very similar to this in the last couple of years. A different cluster development in a different part of the city, but it was, I think, in some sense, precisely the same issue where the builder, you know, used up all of the footprint to build the house, and then the owners came to us and they wanted to build I think it was a deck. And in both of those cases, I can think of at least two, maybe there were more. In both of those cases, we said, well, that's, you know, that was an issue with how it was built, but it's not something that we were, really is within our purview to give relief to. And I'm looking at this and I don't see, in terms of consistency, I don't see this to be much different than the thinking that we took in the other cases. Not that we have established precedent, but we do try to be consistent in how we approach these things. I do think that I am also struggling to see the exceptional characteristic, just looking visually at that particular row of properties, north and south. They all look very, very similar. And so I just don't see if all the neighbors came to us, you know, next month and asked for the same relief, they would give us the same reason for that property being unique, but I don't think that doesn't make it unique. It's the same, the builder had the same idea, did the same thing. It's unfortunate because we've dealt with these cases before, but I don't think that is something that, at least in my opinion, I'm persuaded that is for us to give relief to. So that's kind of where I'm hung up on that. Mr. Fox, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I know earlier this year, we had one of those deck cases, and I believe we did approve the deck. And then I think it was in September, we had another instance of a particularly small lot that didn't meet the standard requirements of a R1C or R1E, whichever single family it was, and I believe we granted that relief as well for a sunroom. So I just referencing past cases, I think there is a precedent to acknowledging the small size of a lot. Particularly, we've had a couple of cases specifically with very early clusters from back before the ordinance was really kind of fine-tuned as it has been, where in the past, you know, the smaller sizes resulting from the early clusters were given relief by the board. So that's, I guess, my thought is that the early cluster and the results of the early cluster ordinance is potentially a reason to seek relief for this applicant.
Mr. McCauley.
The one that cluster development that we did approve the deck for was not an issue of depth, it was more of an issue of elevation, because they had the walkout their first story was a walkout probably about 8-9 feet elevated from the ground. So that's why we went after that one and approved it, because of the elevation, not so much of the size or dimension of the lot, but the elevation. So that was an elevation one versus this is size and dimension that we're going back and forth with. And that's the only one that, in my memory, that we've approved and that was, again, was because of the elevation issue. They were left without any, and with a drain there that was in the way too. So there's mitigating factors where I don't see those mitigating factors here.
It was the Park Manor, I think was the name of the sub, where we had the other issue with the deck. Mr. Eisenbacher, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I was on city council when this subdivision was approved, and this was, from what I remember, the cluster had been recently modified, and it's not the cluster that we have in effect today. It was different from the original cluster. It was an in-between, and the builder's goal was to really maximize the common area. And you can, if you look at the aerials, especially in Google Maps or what the city provided, there's a huge forest area across the street. And when this subdivision was approved, the property to the rear was completely undeveloped. And looking at the maps now, you can see that there's no house directly behind this one. It's all forested common areas behind it. So in terms of impact on the neighbors, we've seen two from the south that did not have a concern, one from the north that didn't want, one from the south that didn't want windows on the side, which they're not going to have, looking at their house. The property, there's no properties behind, which is oftentimes is the primary reason for having a setback, so you aren't too close to each other from the rear. And then that property from the north that Mr. McCauley was concerned about the sunlight, but if you look at the map, that property to the north already has large trees in the backyard, which means they're not getting any morning sun. During the summer, the sun is at a very high apogee in the sky, so this is not going to be casting a shadow onto their deck because of the angle of the sun in the sky. And then in the evening, as the sun is setting to the west, its own house is going to be blocking and making shade on the house. So I don't see how a 10-foot extension on the deck is going to be extremely detrimental, except for right in the heart of winter where the sun is much lower in the sky and people aren't using their deck anyways. And this homeowner was given an opportunity to respond. Obviously, the petitioner had talked to his neighbors. He chose not to respond, either positive or negative, so I don't want to put any thoughts into their concern. This is a 10-foot request. It is not a major request. We can see from the data that this property is very small, much smaller than the rest of the neighbors. And then you guys, if you look at the map, you can see that there was a very large commons area put in place for preserving forest space. And that's the indirect cause of this hardship, was making the property small to have a big forest. So I don't have a problem with granting this variance.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Eisenbacher. Any other comments, Mr. Desmond?
I do. I'm just looking here at the zoning ordinance for the City of Troy, section E2B, which is the cluster zoning section, covers setbacks, and it does indicate minimum setbacks shall be as follows, and in section 2 of that passage indicates rear setback would be 25 feet. So under this, at least if I'm reading it correctly, under the zoning ordinance, if this was zoned according to that cluster zoning, it seems like I don't think he would even need a variance because he's requesting, it would be a foot and some change shorter than what he could do. Am I correct in that? Okay. And if I'm reading this correctly, which I believe I am.
Well, and if I could, I think the rear setback is 25 feet, but as Mr. Eisenbacher indicated, this cluster ordinance is different than the one that this development was approved in. I haven't examined what considerations or development differences or trade-offs, and typically that's what the cluster ordinances are intended to do. In very simple terms, more density, and the trade-off is that you get a large common area of some sort. And we've had cluster developments in front of us under the current ordinance. So while it is 25 feet today, I think it's important that we all keep in mind that there may be trade-offs or balances under the old ordinance that don't exist in this new ordinance. I just wanted to make the board aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other comments or any other motions that members of the board want to bring to the table?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if there's no further discussion, I'd like to move the ordinance, or move a resolution for approval. And in light of the recent court case that was shared with us, I will clearly state the reasons. For A, the exceptional characteristic is the smallness of the property. B, the characteristic is related to the present premises for which it is sought and not some other location. C, the characteristic which makes compliance is not of a personal nature. D, the characteristic which makes compliance with the dimensional requirements was not created by the current or the previous owner. And E, proposed variance is not harmful or alter the essential character of the area in which the property is located, does not impair the adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, or unreasonably increase the congestion, or increase danger of fire, or endanger the public safety, or unreasonably diminish or impair established property value within the surrounding area, or in any other respect impair the health, public health, safety, comfort, morals, or welfare of the inhabitants of the city.
Second.
So this is a motion to grant.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Motion to grant made by Mr. Eisenbacher, seconded by Mr. Fox. Any further discussion from members of the board before we proceed to a vote? Don't see any requests, so Mr. Evans, this is a motion to grant the variance request. So that's a yes to grant, right?
Okay. Mr. McCauley,
No.
Mr. Bostonbrook,
No.
Mr. Eisenbacher,
Yes.
Ms. Chambers,
Yes.
Mr. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Desmond,
Yes.
Mr. Forster.
Yes.
All right, we have a vote of 5-2, so that is a passing vote. So the variance request is granted. The motion's been carried. So thank you, sir, for coming out tonight. We appreciate your time. Your variance has been granted. That will conclude the hearing of cases under Section 5. We will move on to our communications. Any communications?
There's that.
No.
Yes, Mr. Fox.
More news from the Planning Commission on the master plan. The Planning Commission did get the public hearing for the master plan scheduled. I believe it is the first Planning Commission meeting of December. So highly encourage everybody to come, state your thoughts, concerns, et cetera. It is a public hearing, so please feel free to have your voice heard.
I'm sorry, what was that date again?
It's the first Planning Commission meeting of December, which I believe, if I just click open a calendar here,
12,
should be the 12th?
4, 5,
I think it's the 12th.
12,
looking.
12.
Yeah, I'm looking at Mr. Evans to see if he,
Yeah, the second Tuesday, which is the 12th.
perfect.
That's 7, correct?
Yep, 7 PM, same time as these meetings.
Here.
Yep, in this room.
Okay.
Thank you.
Love to have people here.
Thank you.
Thanks for your update, Mr. Fox. I don't see any miscellaneous business on the agenda, Mr. Evans.
That we do not have any applications for December, and barring any objections from the board, I'll cancel that meeting.
Early Christmas present for some of you? All right. Move along to public comment. Any public comment? Open that up. No? All right, well, wish everyone a happy holidays, and I guess I'll see everyone in 2024. We'll be adjourned.
Take care.